going to talk about leading the world in a front on democracy. Of course, I'm talking about the U.S. leading this front. We're going to do this, or we should do this, for two reasons. Both to improve the quality of life of those abroad, to give them better understanding of what freedoms they should have versus what they currently have. That's for education, basically, and also for the national security of the U.S. We need more democratic allies out there. What is a world grounded in democratic principles? Well, what is that? Ask yourself what the main reason immigrants come to the U.S. for. One is democracy. 2 is for opportunity. 3 is for better education. 4, more freedoms. And 5, they want to start a family here to continue the generations of people that they would have. And they want them to live in America where they have more opportunity to be successful. They might come from impoverished countries, countries with tyrannical regimes, which I'm going to get to in a second, but that is the main reason people come here, is mainly for democracy. Now, tyrannical regimes, they cause a large amount of human suffering. Even if you go back in time, and you can understand this because this was so long ago, but when, and I only say that is because people weren't as educated back then to what is actually going on compared to now, where we have a large spread of media, social media, all types of media that really spread information out there today. But back then we didn't have that. So in the War of 1812, which is not a contemporary issue, mind you, but it is kind of relevant to today, because if we never fought the British to protect the U.S. land, and we would have never created this wonderful Constitution or have the foundations for that wonderful democracy that we have today. So I think that tyrannical leaders, there's many in the Middle East. There's many abroad. If you look at Israel, they claim to be a democratic society, but they are completely a tyrannical regime. Why do I say this? If you do the research, you will find many countless examples of how the Israel discriminates against the Palestine, which kind of lives in the Palestinians, which lives in their country. They do this by both evicting them from their houses at random, stopping them at checkpoints, and not letting them return home. It's often called a Palestinian genocide in the country of Israel. So we need to get rid of these tyrannical regimes. Then again, Israel is a ally of the U.S., and so we support them a lot, but we don't really know the facts that's going behind unless we actually live there. We only see what we learn through the media, and the media is often filtered. We need to lead an offensive against terrorism, but I believe before I start on that, there's 2 types of terrorism. There's a good terrorism and a bad terrorism. How can there be a good terrorism? If we have a tyrannical regime, people are going to rebel against it, and it's often going to be called terrorism. That's the fact, is when there are people that terrorize others, they're terrorists, right? Doesn't that make sense? I'm saying we have to lead an offensive against bad terrorism, the terrorism which kills civilians and hurts the quality of life for others abroad and at home. But we don't really have it so much as home as we do abroad, because abroad, such as in a Middle Eastern country. There's some Middle Eastern countries. There's some countries everywhere in the world that have terrorism every day. We have maybe small amounts of terrorism every day, but much of those aren't called terrorism. They're just crimes. Murders, I mean, they could be called terrorism, but they're not really for a specific purpose. If you look at 9/11, which happened only 13 years ago, that is terrorism in the U.S. That killed so many people, and it was so wrong. But we need to lead an offensive against that to uphold democratic values. But we also need to make sure that the good terrorists are able to remove these tyrannical regimes from power. We also need to protect our nation with a sophisticated missile defense system. Now, we have the highest budget for our military than any other country in the world, though our budget is slightly drifting towards social welfare because we have a lot of baby boomers. We have to pay them their Social Security money, but we're still spending more than any other country in the world on our military. So we have these ground-to-air missiles to shoot down incoming missiles. We have there are missile defense systems that defend against nuclear attacks too. But we also have IBMs and offensive missile defense systems too, to counter. And I believe both are relatively important if we want to protect our nation and make sure that we are able to keep our democratic values. This is a hard concept to get around here, is the resources to develop democracies. What are the resources to develop democracies? Well, if you look at what we have a constitution, which is not necessarily a resource for democracy, but it helps lay the foundation for democratic values. The resource for democracy is not in any plan, it's not in any government, it's in the people. Democracy, a good definition would be basically a government led by the people. It's by the people and for the people, and it's in the people that these resources exist. So in order to lay the foundation for democracy in other countries, we need to influence the people into upholding these democratic values. We want them to be educated on what their rights should be, what they should have the freedoms to do, and what they should have the freedoms to not do. Some countries are going to reject this because we can't impose democratic values on them. Some countries are going to disagree, or some people, not even the countries, but the people there will disagree because they will believe what they want to believe no matter what we say or do. But we can at least educate them and hope for the best. And that would be a good example of us trying to provide, us meaning the U.S., trying to provide resources for these non-democratic countries to become democracies, and which will hopefully gain us allies in the future, and friends overseas in the Middle East, and maybe instill a little bit of peace among the Middle Eastern countries if they try and uphold these democratic values which we lay the foundation for. We face new enemies every year. What do I mean by that? Every year there is a change in the UN's most wanted list. Every year there's a different war, civil war, there's an uprising somewhere. We need to support. I mean, it's not, we can't try and impose democratic values. We need to support the democratic values. We need to give these people the resources, but we can't try and impose these, because if you look at what we tried to do in the Middle East, such as a lot of people complain under the Bush administration, we went in there into Iraq, Iran, we try to impose our values versus lay the foundations for them and give these people the information, because it's from the people there that will start their government. We're not going to start their government. I don't know why the U.S. thinks they have any position as to controlling a Middle Eastern country with means of forcing them or trying to impose democratic values on them. I believe that's wrong. That almost sounds like a tyrannical regime, but it's for a good purpose, and I mean, to me, it's for a good purpose. To them, to the people in the Middle Eastern countries, some people aren't as educated. Again, what I said. I don't mean that statement as offensive. I just mean it as the truth. But then again, some people in America aren't as educated as either. So it works out both ways. But I believe that we can't impose democracy in other countries that don't want to accept it. And that's only going to create conflict and create the opposite of democracy in some places. Now, refusing to trade with undemocratic countries, that's only going to hurt U.S. trade. That's also going to hurt the trade with other countries as well. This, well, at least that's the argument that people try and say. It's if we refuse to trade with people, with the regimes in other societies that are not democratic, this will help them support or try and give them a chance at least to uphold these democratic values that are fairly important. Now, it will definitely hurt U.S. trade, but if it's for a good cause, I believe that we should strive for it. We, however, we are one of the wealthiest nations in the world, so it won't hurt us as much as it will hurt them. But I believe we already have trade embargoes with some countries that we don't like. Why not do the same to not the countries that don't have democratic values, but to the tyrannical leaders out there? If we cut off trade to these horrible leaders that are subjugating and imposing these restrictions on these people, on the country's freedom, these people's freedom, then that may force them to try and change their views, and maybe after they change their ways, we could start trading with them again. And that's how I believe we should lead the world on a front against democracy. I believe it's very important, and it should be one of the sole priorities of the U.S. Policy in the Middle East is to lead to lead forward to world democracy. Mainly in the Middle East. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.